The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest room ever built by any species in the known universe. Its walls stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed near the ceiling. Representatives from 37 different alien species sat in their designated sections, each one shaped to fit their unique bodies. Some breathed oxygen, others breathed methane, and a few did not breathe at all. On this day, the hall was quiet. Everyone was waiting for Elder Varath of the Kethrani Dominion to speak. The Kethrani were a proud species with dark green scales and eyes that glowed yellow in the dim light. They had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 10,000 years, and they did not like sharing space with newcomers. Varath stood slowly, his tail sweeping the floor behind him. He looked around the chamber with obvious disgust before speaking. "The humans have built a colony in the Orion sector," he announced. "They call it New Austin. It sits on land that belongs to the Kethrani by ancient right. We have mining claims on that world that go back 3,000 years. I am here to ask the Council for permission to remove them." The word "remove" echoed through the hall. Everyone knew what it meant. From the far side of the chamber, a figure rose to respond. Ambassador Zirith of the Volanthi was tall and thin, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow from within. Her species had lived among the stars longer than any other, and they had learned to watch and wait and remember. The Volanthi had been observing humans since they first discovered fire. "I must speak against this action," Zirith said. Her voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the vast room. "The Kethrani do not understand what they are asking to do. They do not understand humans." Varath made a harsh clicking sound that served as laughter among his kind. "What is there to understand? They are small creatures with short lives. They cannot survive in space without their little suits. They have been traveling between stars for less than 200 years. We have nothing to fear from them." Zirith shook her head slowly. "You see their weakness, but not their strength. You see their short lives, but not what they do with them. Let me tell you a story, Elder Varath. Let me tell you about the Krethian swarm." The chamber grew even quieter. The Krethians had been a species of insect-like creatures that traveled from world to world, consuming everything in their path. They had destroyed over 100 civilizations before they simply vanished from the galaxy. In the year 2089 by the human calendar, the Krethian swarm entered human space. The humans had only colonized a few dozen worlds at that time. They were weak by galactic standards. The swarm killed 3 billion of them in the first wave alone. Varath waved his clawed hand dismissively. And yet the humans survived. The swarm must have moved on to easier prey. "No," Zirith replied. "The swarm did not move on. The swarm no longer exists. Silence. The humans spent 40 years building a fleet," Zirith continued. "They tracked the swarm across 200 light-years of space. They found every world where the swarm had built its nests, and they burned them all. Every single one. They did not stop until the last Krethian was dead. Their species is now extinct because they made the mistake of attacking human children." Varath's yellow eyes narrowed. The Krethians were primitive creatures driven by instinct. They had no real technology, no strategy. The Kethrani Dominion is different. We command the 3rd largest fleet in the galaxy. "The size of your fleet does not matter," Zirith said. She stepped forward, and for the first time, there was real fear in her voice. "You do not understand what drives the humans. They are not like us. When we lose a war, we surrender. We negotiate. We find a way to live with our defeat. Humans do not do this. They do not surrender. They do not forget. And they do not forgive." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every representative. "The humans have a saying that I have never been able to forget. They say, 'We did not come this far to only come this far. Do you understand what this means? It means they will never stop. It means that if you hurt them, they will chase you across the entire galaxy. It means that they would rather die than give up. Vorath let out another clicking laugh, but this time it sounded less certain. You give them too much credit, Ambassador. They are just another young species with more pride than sense. A quick strike will teach them their place. They will learn to respect Kethrani territory. Zirith was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper, but somehow everyone heard it. You are making a terrible mistake, Elder Vorath. A mistake that your people will pay for with blood. I have watched the humans for 300 years. I have seen them fight each other. I have seen them fight other species. And I have learned one truth above all others. The humans are most dangerous, not when they are strong, but when they are hurt. When they are angry. When they have nothing left to lose. She turned to face the full council. I beg you all, do not vote for this war. Find another way to settle this dispute. The mining claims are not worth what will happen if you attack that colony. The humans on New Austin are farmers and teachers and children. If you kill them, you will wake something that you cannot put back to sleep. Elder Vorath stood tall, his scales bristling with anger at being challenged. I call for a vote, he declared. The Kethrani Dominion asked the Council for permission to take military action against the human colony in the Orion sector. The vote was held. It was close, but in the end, permission was granted by a margin of 3 votes. Ambassador Zirith said nothing more. She simply gathered her robes and walked out of the chamber. She did not look back. She already knew what was coming, and she could not bear to watch. On a small blue-green world called New Austin, 800,000 humans went about their daily lives. They worked in their fields. They taught their children. They built their homes and dreamed their dreams. They had no idea that their fate had just been decided by creatures they had never met. A young farmer named Danny Morrison was kneeling in his field, teaching his 7-year-old daughter Katie how to check the soil sensors. The twin suns of the system were setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. See how the light changes color? Danny said, pointing at the horizon. That means the minerals in the atmosphere are different here than on Earth. That is why our crops grow so well. Katie nodded seriously, trying to understand. She was a curious child who asked questions about everything above them, unseen and unknown. The first Kethrani warships were already entering the system. The Kethrani fleet arrived without warning. 47 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming like dark metal teeth against the stars. Grand Admiral Tithfire stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the small blue world spin slowly below him. "Begin the attack," he ordered. His voice was calm. To him, this was not a battle. It was an execution. On the surface of New Austin, it was early morning. The farmers were already in their fields, the children were walking to school, and the small garrison of 200 Marines was running their daily training exercises. No one was looking at the sky. Captain Lucy Hartwell was drinking her morning coffee when the first alarm sounded. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and the kind of face that had seen too many difficult days. She had served in the human military for 25 years, and she knew the sound of that alarm. It meant death was coming. She ran to the command center and looked at the sensor displays. Her coffee cup fell from her hand and shattered on the floor. 47 enemy ships. Her garrison had 3 small orbital stations and a handful of ground-based weapons. It was like throwing stones at a hurricane. "Get me a line to Earth," she ordered, "and start the evacuation protocols. Get everyone to the bunkers, now." Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Cole Peters, was already working the communications panel. His hands were shaking. "Captain, we cannot beat them. We cannot even slow them down." "I know," Lucy replied. "But we can make sure Earth knows what happened here. And we can save as many people as we can. That is our job now. That is the only job that matters." The first plasma bombardment hit the spaceport. Lucy watched through the window as a pillar of fire rose into the sky, turning the morning into something that looked like the end of the world. The sound came a moment later, a deep rumbling boom that shook the walls. Then the screaming started. The Kethrani were not interested in a fair fight. They were not interested in military targets. They wanted to send a message, and that message was written in blood and fire. Their ships moved across the sky like metal clouds, raining destruction on everything below. Danny Morrison was working in his field when he heard the explosions. He looked up and saw the ships, saw the fire, saw his entire world beginning to burn. For one terrible moment, he could not move. Then he heard his daughter screaming. Katie was running toward him across the field, her small legs pumping as fast as they could. Behind her, the town where they lived was already gone, replaced by a rising column of smoke and flame. Danny grabbed his daughter and ran. He did not know where he was going. He only knew that he had to get away from the fire, away from the ships, away from the death that was falling from the sky. He remembered the old mining tunnels on the edge of his property. They had been dug 100 years ago and abandoned when the ore ran out. They went deep into the ground, deep enough that maybe, just maybe, the weapons could not reach them. He ran until his lungs burned, and his legs felt like they were made of water. Other people joined them along the way, neighbors and strangers, all running in the same direction. By the time they reached the tunnel entrance, there were 38 of them. Men, women, and children, covered in dust and ash, their eyes wide with terror. "Get inside," Danny ordered. "Go as deep as you can." They crawled into the darkness just as another wave of fire swept across the land above them. The ground shook. Dust fell from the tunnel ceiling. Katie buried her face in her father's chest and would not look up. In the garrison command center, Lucy Hartwell was still fighting. Her orbital stations were gone. Most of her Marines were dead. But the communications array was still working, and she had one last thing to do. "Lieutenant Peters, are we transmitting?" "Yes, Captain. The signal is going out." Lucy stood in front of the camera. Her face was bloody from a cut on her forehead. Behind her, through the cracked window, the world was ending. But her voice was steady when she spoke. "This is Captain Lucy Hartwell of the New Austin Garrison. We have been attacked without warning by forces of the Kethrani Dominion. They are not attacking military targets. They are killing everyone. Men, women, children. There's been no declaration of war. There has been no attempt at communication. They came here to murder us, and that is exactly what they are doing." She paused to wipe blood from her eyes. "I do not know how many of us will survive this day. I do not know if anyone will live to see what comes next. But I know this. Whoever is watching this message, wherever you are, whatever you do next, remember what happened here. Remember the people of New Austin. Remember the children who died in their schools. Remember the farmers who died in their fields. And remember that the Kethrani did this to us for no reason except that they could." Another explosion shook the building. The lights flickered and went out. In the darkness, Lucy spoke her final words. "My name is Lucy Hartwell. I am a captain in the United Human Federation Marines. And I am asking you, whoever you are, to make them pay for what they have done today. Do not let our deaths be meaningless. Do not let them get away with this. Hunt them down. Find them. And show them what happens when you attack humanity." The transmission ended. 6 hours later, the bombardment stopped. Grand Admiral Tithvior looked down at the burning world and felt nothing but satisfaction. The human colony was destroyed. The message had been sent. Other species would think twice before challenging Kethrani territory. He ordered his fleet to leave. He did not bother to check for survivors. He did not think there would be any. He was wrong. Deep in the mining tunnels, Danny Morrison held his daughter in the darkness. Around them, 37 other people sat in silence, listening to the distant sounds of destruction. They had no food, no water, and no way to call for help. Katie had stopped speaking. She had not said a word since the attack began. She just stared at nothing, her eyes empty, her body still. "It is going to be okay," Danny whispered to her. "Someone will come for us. Someone will find us. You just have to hold on." He did not know if he believed his own words, but he said them anyway, because that is what fathers do. They hope, they fight, they refuse to give up. On Earth, in the great capital city of Geneva, President Margaret Sullivan watched Captain Hartwell's final transmission. Her face was pale. Her hands were steady. And in her eyes, there was a fire that would burn for decades. "How many dead?" she asked quietly. "Nearly 800,000, Admiral Scott Brennan replied. "We think there may be survivors in bunkers and tunnels, but we have no way to reach them. The Kethrani have already left the system." Sullivan nodded slowly. "Call a meeting of the Joint Chiefs. Contact every ally we have." "And Admiral?" "Yes, ma'am. I want to know everything about the Kethrani. Their worlds, their fleets, their leaders, everything. Because when we are done, there will not be a place in this galaxy where they can hide from us." The hunt was about to begin. 6 months passed after the burning of New Austin. To the Kethrani, those months were peaceful. They celebrated their victory. They told stories about how easily the humans had fallen. Elder Vorath was treated as a hero, the leader who had shown the galaxy that the Kethrani were not afraid of anyone. They had no idea what was coming. The rescue ships reached New Austin on a cold, gray morning. The planet was still wounded, its surface scarred by the bombardment, its air thick with ash and dust. The rescue team searched for 3 weeks, digging through rubble, scanning for life signs, refusing to give up. They found 1,216 survivors. Danny Morrison was among them. He had kept his group alive in the mining tunnels for 47 days, rationing the small amount of food they had found, collecting water that dripped from the walls, keeping everyone calm when the darkness and the fear became too much to bear. He had lost 15 pounds and looked 10 years older, but he was alive. Katie was alive too, but she was not the same. She had not spoken a single word since the day of the attack. The doctor said it was trauma, that her mind had shut down to protect itself from the horror of what she had seen. They said she might recover with time and care. They said she might not. The survivors were brought to Earth. They were treated as heroes, as living proof of human strength and human suffering. Their stories were broadcast across every human world and to every species that would listen. The galaxy watched children describe watching their parents die. They watched farmers describe seeing their life's work turn to ash. They watched and they waited to see what the humans would do next. President Sullivan gave them their answer. "We are not going to negotiate," she announced in a speech that was heard by billions. "We are not going to ask for reparations. We are not going to bring this matter before the Galactic Council." The Council voted to allow this attack. They watched our people die. They have made their choice, and now we will make ours. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was hard as stone. "We are going to war. Not for territory. Not for resources. Not for pride. We are going to war because 800,000 of our people were murdered, and the universe must know that there is a price for human blood. A price that will be paid in full." Admiral Scott Brennan was given command of Operation Relentless. He was a quiet man with gray eyes and a reputation for careful planning. He did not believe in fair fights. He believed in winning. His fleet had grown from 30 ships to over 200. The Volanthi, the Morthani, and 7 other species had quietly joined the human cause. They sent ships, supplies, and intelligence. Some of them had their own reasons for wanting to see the Kethrani fall. Others simply understood that the humans were going to win, and they wanted to be on the right side when the war ended. The Kethrani think they are safe. Brennan told his officers aboard the flagship Endurance. The ship was massive, built for one purpose: to carry the human response across the stars. Their space is vast. Their fleet is spread across 40 systems. They expect us to attack their border worlds, fight a few battles, and then come to the negotiating table. Commander Patricia Wade, his tactical officer, smiled grimly. They do not know us very well. No, Brennan agreed. They do not. But they are about to learn. He brought up a holographic map of Kethrani space. It glowed with thousands of points of light, each one representing a world, a station, a fleet position. We have spent the last 5 months gathering intelligence, Brennan continued. We know where their shipyards are. We know where they store their fuel. We know the routes their supply ships take. We know where Grand Admiral Tithvar sleeps at night. And we are not going to attack their borders. We are going to cut off their supply lines, destroy their ability to build new ships, and work our way inward. By the time they realize what is happening, it will be too late. The first strike hit 4 Kethrani systems at the same time. The attacks were surgical, focused on infrastructure rather than people. Human ships destroyed shipyards, fuel refineries, and communication relays. They left the civilian populations unharmed but trapped, unable to call for help or receive supplies. Grand Admiral Tithvar received the news while dining with Elder Vareth. His yellow eyes went wide, and for the first time in his life, he felt something he had never felt before: fear. They hit 4 systems at once, he said, reading the report. They knew exactly where to strike. They knew our patrol schedules. They knew everything. Vareth waved his clawed hand dismissively. It is a desperate move. They are trying to frighten us. Pull back the outer fleets and consolidate near the homeworld. Let them waste their resources on empty space. Tithvar followed the order. He pulled his ships back, abandoning the outer colonies to protect the core systems. It was exactly what Admiral Brennan had predicted. He is doing exactly what we wanted, Commander Wade reported. The outer colonies are now isolated. We can take them one at a time. Good, Brennan replied. Begin Phase 2. Over the next 3 months, the human fleet systematically dismantled the Kethrani war machine. They captured dozens of worlds, accepting surrenders wherever possible and treating prisoners with respect. But they refused every offer of negotiation. We are not here to talk, Brennan told each captured Kethrani commander. We are here to finish what you started. On Earth, President Sullivan received a transmission from the Galactic Council. They were concerned about the scale of the human response. They wanted to discuss peace terms. They wanted to find a diplomatic solution. Sullivan's reply was short. You voted to let them burn our children. You do not get to decide when the burning stops. We do. The Kethrani were beginning to panic. Their mighty fleet was shrinking every week. Their colonies were falling one by one. And the humans just kept coming, relentless and unstoppable, like a tide that could not be turned back. Elder Vareth finally understood what Ambassador Zirith had tried to tell him. The humans were not fighting for territory or resources. They were fighting for something far more dangerous. They were fighting for revenge. And they would not stop until they had achieved it. He tried to flee. He packed his belongings and booked passage on a private ship heading for the far edge of the galaxy. But the humans had thought of that too. Every port was being watched. Every ship was being tracked. There was nowhere to run. There was nowhere to hide. The humans were coming, and they would not stop until they found everyone responsible for New Austin. In a hospital on Earth. Danny Morrison sat beside his daughter's bed. Katie was sleeping, her face peaceful for the first time in months. The doctor said she was making progress. She had spoken her first word that morning. It was Daddy. Danny held her hand and cried. Not from sadness, but from hope. His daughter was coming back to him. And somewhere out there, among the stars, the people who had hurt her were finally learning what it meant to make an enemy of humanity. The siege of Kethra Prime lasted 4 long months. Grand Admiral Tithfire had gathered everything that remained of his once mighty fleet. 112 warships hung in a defensive formation around the Kethrani homeworld, their weapons pointed outward at the enemy that had chased them across the stars. Behind them, the planet spun slowly, home to 12 billion Kethrani who were beginning to understand that their world might soon fall. Admiral Brennan arrived with 240 ships. The human fleet formed a perfect ring around the Kethrani defenses, close enough to be seen, far enough to be safe. And then, instead of attacking, they simply stopped. They waited. Why are we not engaging? Commander Wade asked on the 3rd day. Brennan watched the Kethrani fleet on his display screen. Their ships were holding formation, but he could see small movements, tiny signs of nervousness. Because every day we wait, they get weaker. Their supplies are running low. Their people are afraid. Their leaders are starting to blame each other. When we finally attack, they will not fight to win. They will fight to survive. And survivors make mistakes. On the surface of Kethra Prime, the situation was growing desperate. The blockade had cut off all imports of food, fuel, and medicine. Rationing had begun in the first week. By the 2nd month, people were going hungry. By the 3rd month, riots were breaking out in the streets. Elder Vorath, the leader who had started this war, was hiding in his palace, protected by a wall of guards. He told anyone who would listen that the humans would eventually give up, that they would grow tired of waiting, that help would come from somewhere. No one believed him anymore. The Kethrani military government was falling apart. Generals blamed admirals. Admirals blamed politicians. Politicians blamed each other. Every night, there were arguments and accusations. Every morning, the human ships were still there, waiting. Patient as stones. In the 3rd month, Grand Admiral Tithfire made a decision. He had been loyal to his government his entire life, but he could see that the end was coming. The only question was whether his people would survive it. He sent a secret message to Elder Vorath. The humans want someone to blame, he wrote. Give them what they want, and perhaps they will spare the rest of us. Vorath refused. He would not surrender himself. He would not admit that he had been wrong. He would rather see his entire world burn than face the consequences of his choices. So, Tithfire made a different choice. In the middle of the night, soldiers loyal to the Grand Admiral arrested Elder Vorath and 47 senior officers who had planned and approved the attack on New Austin. They were taken from their beds, stripped of their ranks, and locked in cells beneath the capital city. The next morning, Tithfire sent a message to the human fleet. We have the ones you want. The leaders who ordered the attack. We offered them to you in exchange for peace. Admiral Brennan received the message on his bridge. He read it twice before responding. Bring them to us. All of them. Then we will discuss what comes next. 2 weeks later, a single Kethrani transport crossed the space between the fleets. On board were Elder Vorath, Grand Admiral Tithfire, and 46 other prisoners. They were the architects of the New Austin massacre, delivered by their own people into human hands. The trials were held on Earth, in a great hall built specifically for the occasion. Representatives from dozens of species came to watch. This was something new in galactic history. This was justice. The prosecutor was a woman named Grace Mitchell. She was small and soft-spoken, but her words carried the weight of 800,000 dead. In human history, she explained to the gathered observers, we developed the concept of crimes against humanity after a great war that killed tens of millions of our own people. We decided that certain acts are so terrible that nothing can excuse them. Not orders, not politics, not war. The deliberate targeting of civilians is a crime. The murder of children is a crime. What these prisoners did to the people of New Austin is a crime that goes beyond any border. The trials lasted for 3 months. Every survivor who wanted to speak was given the chance. Danny Morrison sat in the witness chair and described finding his daughter in the rubble, how she had not spoken for months, how she still woke up screaming from nightmares. Other survivors told similar stories. The galaxy listened. Elder Voreth's defense was simple. He claimed he had been acting in the best interests of his people. He claimed he had been protecting Kethrani territory. He claimed the Galactic Council had given him permission. The judges were not impressed. The humans of New Austin were not soldiers, said Chief Judge Henry Crawford as he delivered the verdict. His voice was tired but firm. They were not invaders. They were not threats. They were farmers and teachers and children. You killed them because you thought you could. You killed them because you believed there would be no consequences. You were wrong. Elder Voreth and 17 others were sentenced to life imprisonment on a remote asteroid facility at the edge of human space. They would spend the rest of their lives in small cells, with nothing to do but think about what they had done. The remaining defendants received lesser sentences. None were executed. The humans wanted them alive. They wanted them to spend decades remembering New Austin. Death would have been too easy. After the trials, President Sullivan addressed the Kethrani people directly. Your dominion is dissolved. Your military leaders are in our custody. But we are not here to destroy you. We are here to make sure this never happens again. You will rebuild under new leadership. You will learn to live as equals in a galaxy where might does not make right. And you will remember what happened when you made enemies of humanity. On New Austin, reconstruction had already begun. Ships brought supplies and workers from every human world. New buildings rose from the ashes. New farms were planted in the scorched fields. Danny Morrison had returned with Katie. They stood on a hill overlooking the valley where their old farm had been. Construction drones were laying the foundations for new homes below. Katie was 12 years old now. She had found her voice again, though she was quieter than she had been before. She had seen too much to ever be the carefree child she had once been. But she was alive, and she was healing. Why did they spare them? She asked her father. The Kethrani leaders. After what they did to us, why did we not kill them? Danny thought about it for a long time before answering. Because if we killed them all, we would become like them. And that is not who we are. Justice is not the same as revenge. Revenge is about hurting people. Justice is about making sure the future is better than the past. Katie nodded slowly. She did not fully understand, but someday she would. Below them, a new city was rising from the ruins. It would be called Hope, and it would stand as a reminder to the entire galaxy of what humanity could endure and what humanity could become. 20 years had passed since the fall of the Kethrani Dominion. A new generation had grown up in a galaxy that was very different from the one their parents had known. The stories of New Austin had passed from news to history to legend, told in schools and whispered in council chambers across 1,000 worlds. Ambassador Zereth stood before the Galactic Council one final time. She was old now, the oldest diplomat in the chamber, and her once bright skin had faded to a soft gray. But her eyes still held the same sharp intelligence, and her voice still carried to every corner of the vast room. Today we mark the 20th anniversary of the new Austin Accords, she began. These accords, signed in the years after the HFY War, established a principle that had never existed before in galactic law. A simple principle: no species shall attack the civilian population of another without facing unified galactic response. She paused and looked around the chamber. There were representatives from over 50 species now, including the reformed HFY Republic. They sat quietly in their section, smaller and humbler than they had once been, but present, surviving, learning to be part of something larger than themselves. These accords were born from tragedy, Zirith continued. They were shaped by justice, and they have been maintained by the willingness of all species here to stand together against those who would prey upon the innocent. But let us be honest about what truly enforces these accords. Let us be honest about why no species has dared to repeat what the HFY did. She turned to face the human delegation. The humans taught us something in those dark days. They taught us that strength without mercy becomes tyranny. But they also taught us that mercy without strength is meaningless. They could have destroyed the HFY completely. They had the power and the justification. Instead, they chose justice over revenge. They chose to build rather than to burn. In the observation gallery above the main floor, a woman sat listening. Her name was Katie Morrison, and she was 32 years old now. She had followed her father's example and dedicated her life to building bridges between species. She served as a diplomatic attaché, traveling from world to world, helping to resolve conflicts before they became wars. Beside her sat a young HFY named Veltoth. His grandfather had been one of the junior officers convicted at the trials. The old man had served 15 years of his sentence before being released. He had returned home to help rebuild his people, spending his remaining years teaching young HFY about the mistakes of the past. Veltoth had grown up with those lessons. He had chosen to become a diplomat specifically so he could help prevent another tragedy like New Austin. His friendship with Katie was unusual but genuine, built on years of working together and a shared understanding of what their peoples had lost. There is a saying among the younger species of this galaxy, Zirith was saying below. They tell each other, do not attack the humans. They will hunt you to the ends of the galaxy. This warning is passed down from parent to child, from teacher to student, from leader to leader. And I tell you now, after watching the humans for more than 300 years, that this warning is true. But it is only half the truth. She stepped forward, and her voice grew stronger. The humans remember their dead. This is true. They keep their promises. This is true. They do not stop until they have achieved what they set out to achieve. This is true. But they also choose mercy when they could choose destruction. They build when they could burn. They forgive when they could hate forever. She looked directly at Katie in the gallery above. The humans are not terrifying because of their weapons or their persistence. They are terrifying because you can never be sure what they will do next. They are unpredictable. They are complicated. They are capable of great cruelty and great kindness, sometimes in the same breath. And that is what makes them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Not their strength, their choices. After the ceremony, Katie and Veltoth walked through the gardens of the council complex. The sky above was alien, filled with colors that did not exist on Earth, but Katie had grown used to strange skies. She had seen dozens of them over the years. My grandfather used to talk about the trials, Veltoth said quietly. He said the hardest part was not the sentence. It was sitting in that courtroom, listening to the survivors describe what had happened to them. He said he had never really understood what his leaders had done until he heard it in the words of the people who had lived through it. Katie nodded. My father testified at those trials. I was too young to be there, but I watched the recordings later. It was hard to see him like that, talking about finding me in the tunnels, talking about how I would not speak for months. But he said it was important. He said the Kethrani needed to hear it. The whole galaxy needed to hear it. Did it help? Veltoth asked. Knowing that they were punished? Katie thought about it for a long moment. I do not know. I think what helped more was watching New Austin get rebuilt. Watching people return, watching new families move there, watching life come back. Revenge does not heal anything. Building does. They walked in silence for a while, passing under trees that had been imported from a dozen different worlds. The garden was designed to feel like nowhere and everywhere at once, a place where any species could feel at home. There is something I have always wanted to ask you, Veltoth said finally. Do you hate my people? For what they did? Katie stopped walking and turned to face him. I used to, she admitted. When I was young, and the nightmares were still bad. I hated everyone with scales. I hated everyone who spoke your language. I hated the sound of your ships in the sky. She paused. But then I grew up. I met Kethrani who had been children during the war, just like me. They had not chosen what their leaders did. They had not wanted it. They were just people, trying to live their lives, carrying the weight of their ancestors' mistakes. And I realized that if I hated them forever, the war would never really end. I would be fighting it every day for the rest of my life. Veltoth was quiet for a moment. That is why you became a diplomat? Partly. And partly because my father taught me that the best way to honor the dead is to protect the living. To make sure it does not happen again. Above them, the alien stars were beginning to appear as the sky darkened. In the council chamber behind them, the representatives were voting on a new resolution to extend the accords to protect newly discovered species on the far edges of the galaxy. The vote would be unanimous. No one wanted to find out what the humans would do if it was not that Katie looked up at the stars and thought about her father. Danny Morrison had died peacefully 5 years ago, surrounded by his family, in a house he had built with his own hands on the rebuilt soil of New Austin. He had lived to see his daughter grow up strong and kind. He had lived to see his world come back to life. And in the end, he had told her the same thing he had said on that hill 20 years before. When they watched the construction drones begin their work, we are the people who remember. We are the people who rebuild. And we are the people who make sure it never happens again. That is who humans are. That is who we will always be. Katie smiled at the memory. Then she turned back to Veltoth and continued walking. There was still so much work to do. So many worlds that needed help. So many conflicts that needed resolution. The galaxy was vast and complicated and dangerous. But the humans were there. They remembered. They protected. They built out, and everyone knew better than to forget it.